I'm going to start a quick run through of my BroodMinder.com. I do have sensors on my hives. I think it helps me figure out when the flows are. Being a beginning beekeeper, I didn't know when that was, and also the stress of going through the winter. It's really cold, just to see if the bees are alive, and you can see that without even having to get into the hives, even when it's 1 degree outside. So my apiary is named Backyard, and then I have 4 hives are within that. And I'll go through each.
All right, gonna look into Hive 1. First of all, if you click on Backyard, there's a few different options. You can see all your hives at a glance. I just set these up for 180 days, but you can change that all the way down to 24 hours just to see what's changed recently. I usually look at the 7-day, 14-day, stuff like that, but I'll show some larger trends, what you can see. 14. I'll just jump to 90 here. Quickly, it shows this is the weight of the hive, and you can see as it decreases as winter passes. I weighed all the hive equipment, and we're at 65 pounds of equipment. So this Hive 1 still has almost 100 pounds of honey on it. The brood temperature, you can see that the brood temperature has sort of fallen off in October, and then that temperature has continued to drop, but they're still alive in there because they're definitely above the outside temperature. And then the lower gray bar is humidity. You can see that as I track across. The same is true for each of these hives. And I'll run through each of those hives. Each hive has a little bit more. You can also see these as this is shown as hive, but you can show this as a text. So you can see the current temperature inside and humidity, and the current temperature in the upper box, and then this is the temperature of the hive scale, and the temperature of, and the weight, and that it's the same for each of these. I've got other in here because there's a scale that has data in it, but it was a warranty item, so I had to push it down here, but for some reason it still shows up here. That's not a big deal, but I needed to leave it as a hive to keep the data, so I just put it in an offline hive, and that's why you'll see that extra hive. Hive 2, 3, and 4. So Hive 1, and this can even do a fly out to show you each individual hive in case you need to calibrate any of the sensors. So just looking at a 90-day wait, I did pull the sensors and put new wrappers on them, and that's why there's a dip in this scale right here. Actually, this is the individual scale, not scales averaged. So I was troubleshooting a hive scale, so I put one in there as a test, and that one was definitely needed warranty, and they took care of it, which they're a great company, and they took care of any issues that I've had. So you can see it has, let's go ahead and pull this out a little further. Turn up that scale again. So this hive had a little bit of a glitch, and then they ended up warrantying that scale for me. But during this time, I did pull the supers off, so that's why you see a drop from 245 to 142. And then again, even after pulling the super off, their weight continued to go up, it looks like, until about somewhere in November. So they were still pulling in honey or nectar from somewhere. And then as the winter's going along, you can see that weight is dropping. Not significantly, but it is dropping. So let me just go back to the 90-day, it'll be easier to see here. The honeybee productivity is sort of based on the weight, so I don't look at that too much because the weight usually reflects that. And then the temperature, so each of these lines represents something. So upper brood box all through October, it's been below the brood zone, so there was no brood in the upper box. And then as it gets colder outside, which is this bar here, actually this is the actual sensor from the scale. But as it gets colder outside, you can see that the trend, it follows that trend, but it's significantly warmer than the actually outdoor temperatures are. And this is the outside temperature. You can see the day-night swings, the up and down, up and down. This is above the lower brood box, which is a little more telling because this is where the brood would be. But it looks like the brood sort of fell off somewhere in October as far as the temperatures, if it was close to that sensor. Now that's just sort of a ballpark to tell you about when they're brooding up, and that's the quantity of brood, not necessarily if there may still be brood in here at this temperature, it's just not near the sensor. And I'll show you a little bit further on that in the Mellisphera part of the page, which is just, it's all this data is collected and you can sort of see it here, but that Mellisphera sort of puts it together and helps you track why it went down on certain days according to wind speed and temperatures and everything else related to that. So that's sort of everything. So I'm just going to go through one of these at a time just so you can kind of see. So above the upper brood box wasn't even in the brood zone. Outside the hive just kind of gives you the temperature. So it's pretty warm in October. And the actual temperature sort of tracks that. So 99 degrees on October 6th. It's pretty high. And then above the lower brood box, so I think there was probably a good amount of brood all the way up until probably maybe the beginning of November. And there may have been some warm days where they tried to start, but that's pretty low. And then that just tracks the outside temperature, so you can compare that to the actual inside the box temperatures. So yeah, when it was warm that day, it warmed up inside the box, so that takes care of that. And then the humidity, they seem to be able to maintain this pretty well on all the hives. The dotted line is outside the hive, and this darker purple line is inside the hive. And they seem to maintain that throughout the year. It's something to think about. It's nice to have that sensor, but you may not need it because they seem to just maintain that. So a temperature hive may be sufficient. I'll just go ahead and pull this all the way out to a year and see if we have all that data, that humidity. Yeah, so as far as the humidity, I'm gonna turn off the outside humidity. For the most part, they maintain within that range. Just going back to the temperature, some of these T's are temperature events, and then all of these down here are notes that I've inputted, which helps me understand why there may be some sort of glitch in the temperature. So right here, the sensor was removed to install a hive wrapper, so that's why the temperature dropped right here. So that's why that temperature dropped. And that's why that humidity is dropped, because that was inside of our house, not out in the beehive. And then this also lets you keep track of the battery percentage. So as it gets colder, the percentage drops quite a bit, but I'll probably need to replace those batteries in the springtime when we crack open the hive for the first time. And that's all of Hive 1. This one looks like it had sensors on most of the year, so it kind of helps you see. So when they came out of the winter, they were at 118 pounds. There's a little bit of fluctuation. The lowest I saw there was about 116. And then in February, let's see what we did here. I added a pollen patty, so there's a little bit of a weight gain there, and that probably started them growing, but there wasn't a lot they were bringing in, so the weight was going down. There was eggs, but our weight ended up getting down to 82. Now let's see. ended up getting to about 100. But I did a hive split, so I can look back at my notes here. Did a hive split here. That's why the weight dropped. So I had 2 double deep boxes, and I split them off into. So this hive kept a deep, and then it also gave away a deep. So that's why that weight dropped. So I'm looking. Don't want my hives to be under 100 pounds, and that's the end of March. So they're really eating through their stores pretty quick. In March to February, 123 down to 100. So that's 20 pounds they ate through. So they got down to 113 before I added sugar bricks and pollen patty. Probably did not need to add that pollen patty because that probably ramped up their egg laying and probably burned through their stores quicker. So about 100 pounds there. And then from here you can see just this is pretty much the flow. It gains, let's see, about 100 to about 3 or 4 pounds a week. There's a level there. It was pretty. So it looks like in June, last week of May, 109 pounds to 137 pounds. And there's a blip here, so that may have been adding a super. And then that was that's when I removed the sensor. But yeah, that is when we harvested. That was our last harvest around Labor Day. And then you can just sort of see the weights just hanging out. And then the weight went up because I added a medium box to put some insulation on here. That's the only reason that jumped. So that's really about 144 pounds. And today they're down to 141 pounds. And then again, this productivity is based on kind of the weight of everything. And let's just take that to 90 days. Took in the temperature, really dropped out of that brood rearing stage or phase somewhere, in early November. Out of here, it's out of that zone, but there's just a little bit of buffer because that sensor's not right where the brood is. And then you can see just this is all related to warm days and cold days. And the humidity, looks like they had let the humidity get a little high a couple times. And then again, the batteries. And I'll jump over to Hive 3. Let's see how far out we can go. So I haven't had all of these hives with sensors on them all year, but we'll take a look and see what we got. Looks like we had this one pretty early in the year. Okay, this was just equipment. So this was 68 pounds. That includes the brick and everything that was on it. All right, and that had a top feeder setting on it too. That's where my 65 pounds comes from. It's that. All right, and this is where the split occurred. And that's where that big population jump. And then this is them just building out. And then that's our first harvest was here. We were at 190 pounds and it dropped to about 162 pounds. And that's July 4th weekend. It's actually our second harvest. Probably the first one from this hive though. And then this is our third harvest where we're pulling all the supers off, and that was Labor Day. So we were about 190 pounds down to 120 pounds. And then the rest of this is just the fall flow, and then it started getting cold here, so the temperature's trending down, or the weight is trending down here. And productivity. And I'll just turn off a couple of these, the outside temperature. Turn that one off. Above the upper brood box, we can turn that off, and the scale under the hive. So maybe the upper brood box would be. but this is above the lower brood box. So they pretty much keep it in temperature, and then you can see when the brood starts slowing down in October here. That doesn't mean it completely drops off, it just means that it slows off enough that the sensors aren't picking it up. A good thing to see is these days when let's do the outside temperature. The day when it was, looks like it's 0.8 degrees, it was still 79 degrees inside the box. So the temperature did go down because the day stayed cold, and they got down to about 65 degrees, but not too bad. And the humidity stayed within range. Go back to Hive 2 for just a second, just to look at the last 30 days. Look at that outside temperature versus this one's also reading 0.8, and it was 70 degrees inside the lower box and only 48 degrees in the upper box. But that did trend down to about 53 degrees inside the box. And then we had a nice warm day, so everything is warm inside the box again in the 70s. Now I'm looking to Hive 4, which look at the last 30 days. So there's a little bit of fluctuation. It's not enough to be concerned about, but we got about 150 pounds, and we're down to 136 in the last 30 days. So something to keep an eye on. If that gets into the 110s, that's when we need to start doing either emergency feeding or just look at them closer. All of the hives came through winter last year, so at 110 they were fine. So I'm hoping that we can let them continue to just make it through winter and not worry about having to do any emergency feeding. Here's our temperature again. I'm going to turn off the upper brood box. It does trend lower because there's usually not as much bees in it, but I have a feeling later in the winter that'll trend up because the bees will move up, but we will see. And then the scale under the hive, this is just the outside temperature. It's just a track. And then the upper, above the lower brood box is this temperature. And of course the outside temperature is here, but it's sort of rounded off, and the scale under the hive really tells you that temperature. Humidity's pretty much within range there. It's been raining the last couple of days, so maybe why it's a little high. And that's all for, shows a little bit of weather, but the real stuff is in the Mellisphera. That'll help you get a lot more data that can help you look back